Parker Sterling, the billionaire genius behind Nebula Dynamics, expected a war when he served Reese divorce papers. With billions at stake, the world watched, waiting for screams. Instead, Reese signed silently, taking nothing but her freedom, while Parker's mistress moved in. The media mocked Reese as a doormat, but 6 months later, everything changed. Desperate for funding, at an exclusive Monaco gala, Parker watched the elite applaud a mystery guest holding the power he craved. As the crowd parted, he froze. There stood Reese. He realized, too late, that her silence wasn't surrender. It was the sound of a trap snapping shut. The conference room at Sterling and Associates smelled of polished mahogany and expensive fear. It was on the 45th floor of the Hudson Yards Tower, overlooking a rainy Manhattan that looked like a blurred watercolor painting of gray and steel. Parker Sterling sat at the head of the table, checking his watch, a limited edition Patek Philippe Nautilus that cost more than most people earned in a decade. He tapped the crystal face impatiently. He hated wasting time, and in his eyes, this marriage had become a wasted asset. To his right sat Lee, 24 years old, sharp as a tack, and dressed in a cream-colored power suit that screamed future. She wasn't just his assistant anymore. She was the upgrade. She scrolled through her phone, undoubtedly checking the stock price of Nebula Dynamics, which had surged 4% just on the rumors of the divorce. The market loved a bachelor CEO. Across from them sat Reese. Reese, who wore a simple navy cardigan that had seen better days. Reese, who had dark circles under her eyes and hair pulled back in a messy, practical bun. She looked small in the oversized leather chair. She looked defeated. "Let's go over this one last time," Parker's lawyer, a pit bull of a man named Arthur Penhaligon, said, sliding a thick document across the table. "The prenup is ironclad, Mrs. Sterling, but out of generosity. Mr. Sterling is offering a lump sum of $2 million, plus the deed to the upstate cabin. In exchange, you waive all rights to Nebula Dynamics, the intellectual property, the Manhattan penthouse, and the Hamptons estate. You also sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding the company's internal operations." Arthur paused, clicking his pen. "If you contest this, we will drag this out until you are bankrupt. We will audit every grocery receipt you've signed in the last 15 years. We will make you unhireable." Parker finally looked up from his phone. His eyes were cold, the same blue eyes Reese had fallen for at a coffee shop in Boston 20 years ago, back when they were both eating ramen and coding on borrowed laptops. "Just sign it, Reese," Parker said, his voice bored. "Don't make this embarrassing. You know you can't handle the pressure of a legal fight. You never could handle pressure. That's why you stayed home while I built an empire." Lee suppressed a smirk, covering it with a cough. The room went silent. The air conditioning hummed. Everyone watched Reese. They expected tears. They expected a plea for more money. They expected her to mention the nights she stayed up helping Parker debug the original source code, or the loan she took from her parents to buy their first server. Reese didn't look at Parker. She didn't look at Lee. She looked down at the paper. She reached into her purse. Arthur tensed, ready for her to pull out a counter-offer or a recording device. Instead, she pulled out a cheap, plastic pharmacy pen. "Where do I sign?" she whispered. Parker blinked. "Excuse me? Where do I sign?" Reese repeated, her voice steady, though low. "Page 42. And initial the bottom of every page," Arthur said, nearly stumbling over his words. He had prepared a 3-hour speech to intimidate her. He hadn't expected this. Reese opened the document. Scratch, scratch, scratch. The sound of the cheap ballpoint pen on the high-quality legal paper was the only noise in the room. She didn't read the clauses. She didn't ask for a clarification. She signed away 15 years of marriage, a $10 billion fortune, and her reputation. It took her 5 minutes. She closed the folder and pushed it back toward Arthur. "Is that all?" she asked. "Yes," Parker said, a frown creasing his forehead. He felt cheated. He wanted a fight. He wanted to crush her, to prove that he was the alpha, the genius, the winner. Her surrender felt too easy. It made him feel insignificant. You can go. The check will be wired tomorrow. Reese stood up. She picked up her worn purse. She looked at Parker for the first time. There was no anger in her eyes. There was no sadness. There was only a terrifying, empty calm. Goodbye, Parker, she said. She turned to Lee. The smart home system acts up when it rains. The master code is 0000. Parker never bothered to change the default. And then she walked out. As the heavy glass doors clicked shut, Lee laughed. Wow, that was pathetic. She didn't even try. Parker leaned back, loosening his tie. She knows her place. She was always a background character in my story. He poured himself a glass of water, grinning. Arthur, release the press statement. Amicable separation. Let's get the stock to hit $200 by close. They toasted to victory, unaware that the ink on the divorce papers wasn't a surrender. It was the fuse on a bomb that had just been lit. The months following the divorce were a whirlwind of excess for Parker Sterling. Freed from the dead weight of his wife, he rebranded himself. He became the face of Silicon Valley's new masculinity. He was photographed on yachts in the Mediterranean with Lee, who was now the chief marketing officer of Nebula. He bought a $40 million penthouse in London. He gave interviews to Forbes and Bloomberg about how shedding the past was essential for innovation. Some people are anchors, he told a reporter from Vanity Fair, implying Reese. And some are sails. I finally cut the anchor. The article went viral. Twitter mocked Reese mercilessly. Number the Silent Wife became a trending topic, a meme for women who let themselves get walked over. Meanwhile, Reese had effectively ceased to exist. She moved into a small, nondescript apartment in a quiet neighborhood in Seattle. She had no social media presence. The paparazzi tried to track her for a few weeks, hoping for a photo of her crying in a supermarket or dating a rebound loser, but she gave them nothing. She stayed inside. She ordered groceries online. She disappeared. Eventually, the world forgot about Reese Sterling. But inside Nebula Dynamics, things were starting to glitch. It started small. 3 months after the divorce, Parker stormed into the engineering department. Why is the legacy server flagging unauthorized access? He screamed at his CTO, a nervous man named David. It's not unauthorized access, sir, David stammered. It's a dependency issue. The core algorithm, the Genesis block code that the entire AI platform runs on it, requires a manual authentication key every 90 days. It's a security protocol written into the base layer years ago. Well, put in the key, Parker yelled. We don't have it, sir, David said, sweating. The developer logs say that the key was managed by a user admin 0. Who the hell is admin 0? Parker demanded. I fired the founding team 5 years ago. Is it Wozniak? Is it that guy from MIT? David looked at his tablet. No, sir. The IP address for admin 0 has always been local. It originated from your home address. For the last 10 years, Parker froze. Admin 0. He remembered nights in their first apartment. He would fall asleep on the couch, exhausted, leaving the code a mess of bugs. He would wake up in the morning to find the code clean, optimized, and running perfectly. He always assumed he had done it himself in a caffeine-fueled fugue state, or that Reese had just organized his files. Bypass it, Parker snapped. Rewrite the code. We can't, David said. It's spaghetti code woven into everything. If we force it, the AI hallucinates. It starts deleting client data. We need the key, Parker, or the system crashes in 6 months. Parker felt a cold prickle on his neck. He went home that night and tried to log into the old private server he kept in the basement. Access denied. He tried the password he used for everything. Parker the Great One. Incorrect. He tried Lee's birthday. Incorrect. He tried the date of his IPO. Incorrect. Then he remembered Reese's parting words. The master code is 0000. He typed it in. The screen flashed green. Access granted. But the folders were empty. All the source code backups, the patent filings, the shadow protocols he used to spy on competitors gone. In the center of the screen was a single text file named asset distribution.txt. Parker clicked it. The file contained only one line. I took what was mine. You kept what was yours. S. Parker smashed his keyboard against the desk. She hadn't just left. She had cleaned the digital house. But he couldn't call the police. If he admitted that the genius behind Nebula Dynamics didn't know his own encryption keys, the stock would tank. He was trapped. It doesn't matter, he muttered to himself, pouring a scotch. I have the capital. I have the brand. I can buy new code. I can buy new geniuses. He needed money, massive amounts of liquid capital, to rebuild the back end of his company before the 90-day timer ran out and the system crashed. That was when the invitation arrived. It came in a matte black envelope, made of a material that felt like velvet but was heavy as slate. There was no stamp. It had been hand-delivered by a courier in a tuxedo. Inside was a card embossed with real gold leaf. The Obsidian Gala, hosted by the Croft Syndicate location. Villa Leopolda, French Riviera date. October 15th, admit one. Parker's eyes widened. The Obsidian Gala. It was a myth. It was the gathering of the invisible money. Sovereign wealth funds, old European banking families, the people who owned the people who owned the politicians. It was hosted by Elias Croft, a billionaire so reclusive that no photo of him had been published since 1999. Rumor had it that Croft was looking to invest $50 billion into a single tech sector. This is it, Parker grinned, the panic of the missing code fading. I charm Croft. I get the billions. I fix the company. Reese can rot with her encryption keys. He looked at the invitation again. It was addressed to Mr. Parker Sterling. No +1. Lee couldn't come. Perfect, he thought. No distractions. The Villa Leopolda loomed over the Mediterranean like a fortress of diamonds. Security was tighter than the G7 summit. Parker had to pass through 3 checkpoints just to get his car valet parked. He stepped out of his rented Bugatti, smoothing his tuxedo. He was used to being the biggest fish in the pond. In San Francisco, he was a god. Here, he felt, distinctively middle class. To his left was the crown prince of a Middle Eastern nation. To his right was the CEO of BlackRock, chatting casually with the woman who owned half the lithium mines in Chile. Parker took a breath and entered the ballroom. It was a sea of silk, jewels, and power. The air smelled of rare orchids and old money. He grabbed a glass of champagne, scanning the room for Elias Croft. He had studied the few available grainy photos of the man. White hair, scar on the left cheek, usually wears a signet ring. Parker worked the room. He was charming. He was aggressive. But he was hitting walls. Mr. Sterling, said the CEO of a major German bank, looking down his nose. Nebula Dynamics. Yes? I hear there are. And stability rumors regarding your platform. Gossip, Parker laughed, flashing his white teeth. We are pivoting to a new quantum architecture. Actually, that's what I'm here to discuss with Mr. Croft. The German banker raised an eyebrow. With Elias? Good luck. He hasn't spoken to a tech CEO in 3 years. He finds them loud. I can be very quiet, Parker quipped. The lights in the ballroom dimmed. A hush fell over the crowd. A spotlight hit the grand staircase. A man stepped out. It was Elias Croft. He looked older than his photos, leaning on a cane with a handle carved from a single black diamond. He radiated authority. Welcome, Croft's voice boomed, amplified by hidden speakers. Tonight, we do not just celebrate wealth, we celebrate vision. For decades, I have bet on numbers. Tonight, I am betting on a person. The crowd murmured. Croft was announcing a partnership. I have spent the last 6 months vetting a new partner, Croft continued. Someone with the strategic patience of a grandmaster. Someone who understands that true power is not in the noise, but in the silence. Parker's heart hammered. Strategic patience. That sounded like him. He had waited out the market downturns. He was the visionary. Please welcome, Croft gestured, to the top of the stairs, the new managing partner of the Croft Syndicate's tech division and the majority shareholder of the newly formed Phoenix Holdco. Parker stepped forward, ready to wave. He adjusted his tie. This was his moment. Miss Reese Jenkins. Parker froze. His foot hovered in midair. At the top of the stairs, a figure stepped into the light. It was Reese. But it wasn't the Reese from the lawyer's office. The gray cardigan was gone. She was wearing a gown of midnight blue liquid silk that hugged a body Parker had forgotten she possessed. Her hair was down, cascading in waves of chestnut glory. Around her neck sat a necklace that looked suspiciously like the Romanov sapphire, a piece that had been missing since the 1920s. She didn't look down. She didn't look shy. She looked like a queen surveying her subjects. She began to descend the stairs. Every eye in the room was on her. Parker felt the blood drain from his face. "No," he whispered. That's my wife." "Ex-wife?" whispered the German banker next to him, sounding amused. "And it appears she is now your boss, Herr Sterling." Reese reached the bottom of the stairs. Elias Croft offered her his arm. She took it, and for a split second, her eyes locked with Parker's across the room. She didn't smile. She didn't frown. She simply raised her champagne glass in a microscopic toast and then turned her back on him to greet the Prime Minister of Italy. Parker stood there, the glass shaking in his hand, as the realization hit him like a physical blow. Phoenix Holdco. Phoenix rises from the ashes. She hadn't just taken the cabin. She had taken his future. Parker Sterling had negotiated billion-dollar acquisitions while hungover. He had fired his best friend over a Zoom call without blinking. He considered himself a master of pressure. But watching Reese glide through the ballroom, shaking hands with oligarchs who wouldn't return Parker's calls, he felt a frantic, clawing desperation he hadn't felt since he was a broke college student. He didn't wait for an opening. He carved one. As Reese moved toward the terrace, a semi-private balcony overlooking the moonlit harbor, Parker shoved past a waiter, nearly knocking a tray of caviar to the floor. He slipped through the glass doors just before security could intercept him. "Reese," he hissed. She stopped. She was leaning against the stone railing, the sea breeze catching the loose strands of her hair. She didn't jump. She didn't turn around immediately. She took a slow sip of her champagne, savoring it, before pivoting on her heel. "Parker," she said. Her voice was different. It wasn't the soft, accommodating murmur he was used to. It was pitched lower, resonant, the voice of someone who gave orders rather than took them. "You're trespassing. This terrace is reserved for platinum-tier guests. You're only gold, I believe?" "Cut the act," Parker snapped, stepping into her personal space. He expected her to shrink back. She held her ground, looking up at him with mild amusement. "What is this? Sleeping your way to the top? I didn't think you had it in you. Who is it? Croft? Is that how you got the invite?" Reese laughed. It was a genuine, throaty laugh that grated on his nerves. "Oh, Parker, you always did think the only way a woman enters a room is on a man's arm. It's almost quaint." She set her glass down on the stone ledge. "I didn't sleep with Elias. I saved him." "Saved him? You?" Parker sneered. "You can't even fix the Wi-Fi." "I saved his liquidity algorithm," Reese said, her tone suddenly sharp, cutting through his bluster. 3 years ago, the Croft Syndicate's high-frequency trading bot was leaking millions due to a rounding error in the floating point logic. Their entire engineering team missed it. I spotted it in 10 minutes, looking at their public API logs. Parker froze. You were coding?" "I never stopped coding, Parker," she said softly. "I wrote the patches for Nebula while you were sleeping. I optimized the database while you were golfing, and when I had spare time, I freelanced. Under a pseudonym, of course. The Architect." "Does that ring a bell?" Parker felt the blood leave his face. The Architect. It was a legend on the dark web forums and elite coding discords. A mysterious troubleshooter who charged $5 million per consultation and never missed. Parker himself had tried to hire the Architect twice to fix Nebula's server load issues. He had been rejected both times. Parker stammered. You're the architect? And you, Reese stepped closer, her eyes cold, are a fraud, a frantic frontman who hasn't written a viable line of code since 2015. I carried you, Parker. I carried Nebula, and when you threw me away, you didn't just lose a wife. You lost your engine. Parker's mind raced. He needed to regain control. He needed to leverage this. Okay, fine. You're talented. I admit it. Look, Reese, let's be adults. Nebula is in trouble. The admin, zero key. The system is rejecting the bypass. I need the key. If the stock tanks, your alimony checks stop clearing. Reese raised an eyebrow. Alimony? Parker, read the divorce settlement again. I didn't ask for alimony. I took the lump sum. 2 million. Remember? That's peanuts, Parker cried. I can give you 20 million right now. Just give me the code. I don't need your money, Reese said, turning back to the ocean. I have Phoenix Holdco. Do you know what we specialize in? Distressed assets. We buy failing tech giants, strip them for parts, and rebuild them properly. She looked back at him, a predator's smile playing on her lips. I'm not here to help you, Parker. I'm here to watch. I'm waiting for the 90-day mark. I'm waiting for Nebula to crash. And when the stock hits single digits, I'm going to buy my company back. Without you. Parker lunged for her arm. You can't do that. I built that brand. Before his hand could touch the silk of her dress, a shadow materialized from the darkness. A massive bodyguard, easily 6'5", stepped between them. He didn't speak. He just placed a hand on Parker's chest and shoved. Parker stumbled back, his expensive loafers slipping on the stone. Mr. Sterling, the bodyguard rumbled. Mr. Croft requests that you do not harass his partners. Please return to the main hall, or you will be escorted off the island. Parker straightened his jacket, his face burning with humiliation. He looked at Reese one last time. She wasn't even looking at him anymore. She was typing something on her phone. This isn't over, Parker spat. I'll rewrite the code. I'll hire the best. I will bury you. Tick-tock, Parker, Reese said without looking up. 42 days left. Parker stormed back into the party, but the glamour was gone. The champagne tasted like vinegar. The laughter of the elite sounded like judgment. He grabbed his phone and dialed Lee. Wake up the engineering team, he barked, ignoring the time difference. I want every freelancer, every hacker, every kid with a laptop on payroll by morning. We have to crack the Genesis block. Now. Parker? Lee's sleepy voice answered. What happened? Reese happened, he growled. She's coming for us. The decline of Nebula Dynamics wasn't an explosion. It was a rot. In the weeks following the Obsidian Gala, the atmosphere inside the Hudson Yards headquarters shifted from arrogant confidence to suffocating paranoia. Parker Sterling was no longer the charismatic visionary. He was a tyrant. He stopped sleeping. He moved a cot into his office. He fired 3 lead developers in a single week because they couldn't bypass the admin zero authentication. It's just a password, Parker screamed at a team meeting, throwing a stapler at the wall. It's a string of characters. Brute force it. We can't, sir, the new CTO, a woman poached from Google named Chen, explained calmly. She was the 3rd CTO in a month. The encryption is polymorphic. Every time we guess wrong, the lock changes its shape, it adapts, it learns from our attacks. Whoever wrote this, they built a living defense system. Parker stared at the screen. The code was mocking him. It was Reese's mind, Reese's logic, barring the door. Meanwhile, the market was smelling blood. Rumors of the instability Parker had dismissed in Monaco were leaking. A whistleblower, Parker suspected a disgruntled engineer he'd fired, posted a thread on Reddit claiming that Nebula's AI was starting to hallucinate. Users began to notice. The smart home features Nebula sold were glitching. In Ohio, a Nebula smart lock trapped a family inside their house for 6 hours. In Tokyo, a Nebula automated trading bot sold a client's entire portfolio for a loss of $3 million in seconds. The stock price, which had been hovering at $185, dipped to $160, then $140. Lee entered Parker's office, She looked tired. The glow of the upgrade had faded. She was no longer just the pretty face. She was the one fielding calls from angry investors, and she was realizing that she had bet on the wrong horse. "Parker," she said, closing the door, "we have a problem with the board. Tell them to hold," Parker muttered, his eyes glued to a monitor of scrolling code he didn't understand. "Tell them I'm close. They don't want to wait," Lee said. "And there's something else," the bank called. "They're freezing the line of credit on the new data center." "What?" Parker spun around. "Why?" "Because our collateral is the IP," Lee said, her voice trembling. "And since the IP is currently malfunctioning, the asset valuation has dropped. Parker, if we can't pay the server costs, the cloud goes down. If the cloud goes down, the company dies." "It won't go down," Parker slammed his fist on the desk. "I just need time." "We don't have time," Lee yelled back, losing her composure. "And I checked the accounts, Parker. You spent $20 million last month on consultants to crack the code. We are bleeding cash." She paused, taking a breath. "I looked up Reese's filing. Phoenix Holdco. Don't mention her name," Parker warned. "They just bought Vortex Systems," Lee continued. "Vortex is our main competitor in cloud storage. She controls the infrastructure we run on. Parker, she's squeezing us from the outside, while the code squeezes us from the inside." Parker slumped in his chair. It was a pincer move. Classic military strategy. "She wants a deal," Lee said. "Her lawyer contacted us this morning." "I told you, no deal," Parker said weakly. "She's not offering to buy the company yet," Lee said. "She's offering a stabilization patch. A temporary fix to keep the lights on. For a price." "What's the price?" "She wants the Hamptons house," Lee said. "And a public apology, live-streamed." Parker laughed. A dry, humorless sound. "The house she didn't want in the divorce? The house she let me keep?" "She wants to take it from you," Lee whispered. "She wants you to hand it over." Parker looked out the window. The rain was falling again, just like the day she signed the papers. He realized now that the cabin wasn't a consolation prize. It was her command post. She had gone there to sharpen her knives. "Tell her no," Parker said. "I'm not apologizing to my ex-wife on YouTube. I'd rather burn this place to the ground." Lee stared at him. For the first time, she looked at him with disgust. "You really are an egomaniac, aren't you? You'd destroy everyone's jobs just to save your pride?" "Get out," Parker said. Lee turned to leave. At the door, she stopped. "I'm updating my resume, Parker, just so you know." She slammed the door. Left alone, Parker pulled a bottle of scotch from his drawer. He poured a glass, his hands shaking. He looked at the countdown clock on his screensaver. Days until system reset. 14. 2 weeks. If he didn't input the admin, 0 key, in 2 weeks, the Genesis block would execute a hard reset. It would wipe the user data to protect privacy, a failsafe Reese had insisted on years ago. It would be the end of Nebula Dynamics. He took a swig of scotch. He had one card left to play. It was dirty. It was illegal. But he was desperate. He picked up his burner phone and dialed a number he had saved under "Do Not Answer." "It's me," Parker said, when the line clicked open. "I need you to break into a physical location." "Address?" a distorted voice asked. "A cabin in upstate New York," Parker said. "I need a hard drive, a laptop, a notebook, anything. The target is a woman. She lives alone. Cost? $50,000. Cash." "Done." Parker hung up. He stared at his reflection in the dark window. He looked old. "You want war, Reese?" he whispered. "I'll bring the war to your doorstep." He didn't know that Reese had anticipated this too. She knew Parker better than he knew himself. She knew that when a narcissist is cornered, he doesn't surrender. He bites. And she had set a trap for the wolf. The cabin in upstate New York was buried under 2 feet of fresh snow. It looked like a greeting card illustration. A rustic A-frame structure made of cedar and stone, nestled deep in the Catskills, miles from the nearest neighbor. Smoke drifted lazily from the chimney. It projected an image of cozy, vulnerable isolation. To Parker Sterling, looking at satellite imagery in his Manhattan office, it looked like an easy target. To the man, Parker had hired a freelance corporate extraction specialist who went by the name of Miller. It looked like a paycheck. Miller parked his nondescript van a mile down the road and hiked the rest of the way through the woods. He was wearing night vision goggles and carrying a backpack filled with signal jammers and lockpicking tools. He had been told the target was a solitary woman, likely unarmed, possessing a hard drive worth millions. He reached the perimeter of the property at 2 a.m. He checked his scanner. No alarm signals, no Wi-Fi broadcasting. It was electronically silent. Amateurs, Miller muttered to himself. He cut the phone line for good measure, though nobody used landlines anymore, and crept toward the back door. He used a tension wrench on the lock. It clicked open in 10 seconds. Too easy, he thought. Miller stepped into the mudroom, shaking the snow off his boots. The house was warm and smelled of cinnamon and wood smoke. He drew a stun gun, moving silently toward the living room, where a laptop sat open on a coffee table, its screen glowing in the dark. He reached for the laptop. Click. The sound was mechanical, loud, and came from the ceiling. Suddenly, steel shutters slammed down over every window and door in the house, sealing the cabin instantly. The cozy A-frame had just transformed into a bunker. Miller spun around, raising his weapon. Who's there? The lights in the living room flared on not warm yellow bulbs, but harsh, industrial-grade LEDs that blinded him. Good evening, Mr. Miller, a voice said. It wasn't Reese. It was a synthesized voice, coming from hidden speakers. You have entered a restricted zone. Facial recognition confirmed. Miller, Jonathan, former private security, currently wanted for burglary in 3 states. Miller scrambled for the back door. He tugged at the handle. It was magnetized shut with the strength of a bank vault. He pulled out his signal jammer to kill the system. Jamming detected, the voice said calmly. Switching to hardwired internal intranet. External authorities have already been notified. Response time, 12 minutes. Miller panicked. He grabbed a heavy iron poker from the fireplace and smashed it against the window. The glass didn't shatter. The poker bounced off. Polycarbonate, ballistic glass. Then, the laptop on the table changed screens. A video feed appeared. It was Reese. She wasn't in the cabin. She was sitting in a high-back chair in a modern office, sipping espresso, looking at him through the camera. Hello, Jonathan, Reese said, her voice crisp and clear. You're looking for the encryption key, aren't you? Miller stared at the screen, trapped. Let me out, lady. I didn't steal anything yet. You let me out, I disappear. I can't do that, Reese said, sounding almost apologetic. You see, this cabin isn't my home. I haven't lived there for months. It's a honeypot, a server farm disguised as a house, designed specifically to catch authorized attempts to breach my system. She leaned forward. Did Parker send you? Miller hesitated. I don't know a Parker. Don't lie to me, Reese said. The police will offer you a plea deal if you give up the client. If you don't, I will hand over the video footage of you breaking and entering. You'll do 10 years, Jonathan. Parker Sterling won't wait for you. Miller looked at the steel shutters. He looked at the camera. He dropped the stun gun. He paid cash, Miller said. But I have the recording of the call. Reese smiled. It was a terrifying smile. Upload it to the laptop. Now. Miller fumbled with his phone, connecting it to the open computer. Done. Now open the door. The police are already at the driveway, Reese said. I can't open the door. But don't worry. My lawyers will ensure you get a fair trial, provided you testify. The feed cut. 2 hours later, Manhattan. Parker Sterling was pacing his office, waiting for Miller to call. The bottle of scotch was nearly empty. His phone rang. He snatched it up. Did you get it? Mr. Sterling? The voice wasn't Miller's. It was deep, authoritative, and official. Who is this? Parker demanded, his stomach dropping. This is Detective Vance, with the NYPD Cybercrimes Division, assisting the New York State Police. We have a warrant for your arrest regarding conspiracy to commit corporate espionage and solicitation of burglary. Parker dropped the phone. It clattered onto the hardwood floor. He ran to the window. Down below, on the street, he saw the flashing lights. Not one cruiser, 4, and a van from CNBC. How? How did the news know? He realized then that Reese hadn't just called the police. She had tipped off the press. She wanted the perp walk. She wanted the world to see the king in handcuffs. No, Parker whispered. No, no, no. He tried to shred the documents on his desk, the financial reports showing Nebula was insolvent, but the door to his office burst open. It wasn't the police yet. It was Lee. She was holding her resignation letter, but she stopped when she saw his face. She saw the flashing lights reflecting on the wall. You did it, she said, her voice void of sympathy. You actually sent someone. Help me, Lee, Parker pleaded, backing away from the door. Call legal. Get Arthur on the phone. Tell them it's a misunderstanding. Lee looked at him, a man she had once thought was a god. Now he was just a desperate criminal in a rumpled suit. Arthur quit an hour ago, Lee said. He saw the police report online. Reese live-streamed the security footage from the cabin to a private server accessible by the board of directors. Parker sank into his chair. The board knows? The board just voted to remove you as CEO, effective immediately, Lee said. They're trying to save the stock price before the market opens. But it's too late. Pre-market trading has Nebula down 60%. She placed her badge on his desk. Goodbye, Parker. I hope the jail cell is smarter than your house. She walked out, leaving the door open. 2 minutes later, the police walked in. The footage of Parker Sterling being led out of the Hudson Yards Tower in handcuffs, his jacket over his head to hide his face, was the most watched video on YouTube that week. It was titled, The Fall of a Titan. But for Reese, watching from her penthouse suite in the Phoenix Holdco headquarters, it wasn't entertainment. It was simply the completion of a transaction. She turned off the TV. Miss Jenkins? Her assistant asked, standing by the door. The board of directors from Nebula Dynamics is on line 1. They are begging for a meeting. Reese checked her watch. It was 9 a.m. exactly. The market had just opened. Nebula stock was trading at $14 a share. It was junk status. The company was worth less than its liquidation value. Let them wait 10 minutes, Reese said, smoothing her skirt. Let them sweat a little more. And then, Reese said, picking up a thick leather folder, connect me. Tell them I have a proposal. I'm going to make them an offer they can't refuse. She walked to the window, looking out over the city that Parker had claimed was his. It's time to pick up the pieces, she whispered. The war was over. The occupation was about to begin. The air inside the executive boardroom of Nebula Dynamics was so cold it felt less like a corporate office and more like a morgue. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of a gray, weeping Manhattan skyline, but no one was looking outside. Every pair of eyes was locked onto the massive LED projection screen at the head of the room. It displayed a single, terrifying red graphic, a countdown clock ticking away the remaining life of a $50 billion empire. Time until Genesis reset. 0 hours, 58 minutes, and 12 seconds. 58 minutes. In less than an hour, the Genesis block, the proprietary AI core that powered municipal power grids in Chicago, hospital networks in London, and banking servers in Tokyo, would commit digital suicide. It was a scorched earth protocol, a failsafe designed to wipe the core memory and scramble every byte of client data to protect the system from unauthorized leadership. The silence in the room was heavy, broken only by the rhythmic drumming of fingers on mahogany and the hum of the air filtration system. The board of directors sat around the table like condemned men waiting for the executioner. Preston Galloway, the chairman of the board, and a man who had survived 3 SEC investigations and a hostile bid from Microsoft, looked on the verge of a stroke. He loosened his silk tie, his face slick with sweat, despite the Arctic temperature of the room. "Where is she?" Preston snapped, his voice cracking. He turned to his aide, a young man who looked like he might faint. "She confirmed the appointment for 10 a.m. It is 10:02. Does she understand that we are bleeding $10 million a minute in pre-market valuation?" "She's in the building, sir," the aide whispered, checking his phone with trembling hands. "Security cleared her 3 minutes ago. She stopped at the lobby cafe. Preston's face turned a violent shade of purple. The cafe? We are facing a global catastrophe, a liability event that will see us all in federal prison, and she's stopping for a latte? Before he could scream further, the heavy double doors swung open. Reese entered. She wasn't wearing the defeated gray cardigan from the divorce settlement, nor was she wearing the midnight blue gown from Monaco. Today, she wore a white, tailored power suit that looked like armor, sharp enough to cut glass. She carried no briefcase, no lawyer, and no entourage. Just a single tablet tucked under her arm and a steaming paper cup from Starbucks in her hand. She didn't apologize for being late. She didn't acknowledge the panic in the room. She simply walked to the head of the table, the chair that had belonged to Parker for 15 years, and sat down. She placed the cheap coffee cup on the multi-million-dollar table. The soft thud sounded like a gavel. "Gentlemen," Reese said, her voice terrifyingly calm, "and ladies, you look stressed." "Stressed?" Preston slammed his hand on the table, standing up. "Miss Jenkins, this is not a social call. Your ex-husband's incompetence has triggered a kill switch in our system. You are the only person alive with the encryption key. We are prepared to offer you a generous consulting fee of $5 million to input the code. Right now." Reese took a slow sip of her coffee, maintaining eye contact over the rim of the cup. She swallowed, set the cup down, and smiled. "No." The room erupted into chaos. "This is blackmail," shouted the head of the audit committee. "People will die if the hospital grids go down," screamed the chief legal officer. "We will sue you into oblivion. We will take everything you have." Reese waited. She didn't flinch. She watched them scream until they ran out of breath, her expression one of mild boredom. When the noise finally subsided into sullen murmurs, she tapped her tablet. The image on the main screen changed. The terrifying countdown clock shrank to the bottom corner, replaced by a dense, complex legal document. "Let's clarify the reality of your situation," Reese said, her voice cutting through the tension like a scalpel. "First, I am not here as a consultant. I am here as a buyer." "A buyer?" Preston scoffed, trying to regain his composure. "Don't be ridiculous. We are a $50 billion market cap company. Phoenix Holdco is a boutique firm. You don't have the liquidity to buy a single division, let alone the enterprise." "You were a $50 billion company," Reese corrected him gently. "As of this morning, with your CEO arrested for burglary, your proprietary tech failing, and the news leaking to the wire services, your stock is trading at $11. Your market cap has collapsed by 80%. She swiped the screen, highlighting a paragraph in red. "Furthermore, Nebula Dynamics is carrying $4 billion in short-term debt, due next month. You were banking on the new server launch to refinance that debt. Since the launch is dead, the banks panicked." Reese leaned forward, her eyes hardening. "My firm, Phoenix Holdco, purchased that debt from your lenders at 4 a.m. this morning for 50 cents on the dollar. You don't owe the bank anymore, Preston. You owe me. And you are technically insolvent." The blood drained from the faces of the board members. They looked at each other in horror. She hadn't just bought their stock, she had bought the mortgage on their house. She held the axe. "Here is the deal," Reese continued, her voice devoid of emotion. "I will input the admin, zero key. I will stabilize the grid. I will save the company from bankruptcy and save you from criminal negligence charges." "In exchange for what?" Preston asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Total control," Reese said. "I want 51% of the voting stock transferred to Phoenix Holdco. I want the immediate, unconditional resignation of every board member who approved Parker's aggressive divorce strategy. And I want the authority to rebrand the company." "This is a hostile takeover," a board member shouted from the back. "It's piracy. We'll fight this in court." "You have 45 minutes," Reese pointed to the clock, which now read 0 hours, 44 minutes, and 15 seconds. Litigation takes years. The Genesis reset takes minutes. If that clock hits 0, Nebula Dynamics is worth 0. The shareholders will lose everything. The lawsuits from your clients, governments, hospitals, banks will strip you of your personal assets. You will lose your homes in the Hamptons. You will lose your reputations. She leaned back in the leather chair. Or, you sign this paper. You step down with your golden parachutes. You keep your personal fortunes. And I fix the mess my husband made. Preston looked at the digital contract, projected on the screen. He looked at the countdown. 0 hours, 41 minutes. He looked at Reese. For years, they had ignored her. They had treated her as the silent wife, the accessory to Parker's genius. They had thought Parker was the visionary because he was loud and charismatic. They hadn't realized that while Parker was making the noise, Reese was composing the music. "If we sign," Preston whispered, his hand shaking as he reached for his stylus. "Can you actually fix it?" Parker hired the best hackers in the world. They spent millions and couldn't bypass the encryption. Reese smiled. It was a small, sad smile that hinted at a loneliness they would never understand. Parker couldn't bypass it, because the key isn't a password, Preston. It's not a string of numbers. What is it? The Genesis block, Reese explained softly, was designed to sync with a specific biorhythm, mine. I wrote it that way 15 years ago, not to trap Parker, but because I was the only one who understood the ethical parameters of the AI. The system literally needs me to breathe life into it. It's a heartbeat check. The room went dead silent. The technology was light years ahead of anything they thought they owned. They had been trying to pick a lock that required a living soul. Preston uncapped his pen. He looked defeated, a king stripped of his crown. "God help us," he muttered. He signed. One by one, the other board members signed the tablet as it was passed around. When the last signature was dry, Reese stood up. She walked to the main server terminal in the corner of the room. She didn't type a code. She placed her right hand on the biometric glass panel. She took a deep breath and spoke a single phrase into the microphone. "System, the architect is home. Authorization, Alpha 1. The terminal hummed. The red emergency lights in the room flickered and turned a cool, steady blue. The countdown clock froze at 0 hours, 3 minutes, and 15 seconds. Then, it vanished. The screen flashed. System stabilized. "Welcome back, Reese." The hum of the servers changed pitch, running smooth and quiet, like a beast that had been calmed by its master. Reese turned to the board, who were slumped in their chairs, exhausted and unemployed. "Get out," she said. 3 months later, the visiting room at the correctional facility in upstate New York was stark, smelling of bleach and industrial sadness. The fluorescent lights buzzed incessantly. Parker Sterling sat on one side of the scratched plexiglass divider. He looked terrible. His trademark hair was thinning and unkempt. His skin possessed a gray prison pallor, and the bespoke suits had been replaced by a shapeless orange jumpsuit. The arrogance was gone, scraped away by the reality of a 5-year sentence for corporate espionage, solicitation of burglary, and conspiracy. Reese sat on the other side. She looked radiant, glowing with the kind of health and confidence that freedom brings. "Why did you come?" Parker asked, his voice raspy. He refused to look her in the eye, staring instead at his hands folded in his lap. "To give you this," Reese said. She slid a folded piece of paper through the document slot. Parker picked it up slowly. It was a deed. The deed to the cabin in the Catskills, the place where he had sent a thief to rob her. "I don't understand," Parker said, finally looking up. His eyes were watery. "You're giving it back? But you fought for it." "I fought for my dignity, Parker. Not the real estate," Reese said gently. "I don't need it anymore. I sold the penthouse in Manhattan. I bought a quiet place near the lake in Zurich. The cabin. It has too many memories. Mostly of you ignoring me while I fixed your code in the dark." Parker gripped the paper. "Reese. He choked on the words, struggling with the weight of his regret. "I built that company. It was mine. I was the face of it." "You built the brand, Parker. You built the hype," Reese said, standing up. "But you never built the foundation. A house built on sand always falls." She turned to leave, her heels clicking on the linoleum floor. "Wait," Parker called out, a flash of panic in his eyes. He couldn't bear the thought of her walking away, leaving him alone in the silence. What? What did you rename the company? I don't have internet access here. The guards won't tell me. What did you call it? Reese paused at the heavy steel door. She looked back at him, the man she had once loved, the man who had underestimated her for 15 years until it cost him everything. I called it Echo, she said. Echo? Parker frowned, confused. Because, Reese smiled, and it was the smile of a woman who had finally found her own voice. That's all that's left of you, Parker. Just a faint noise in the background of my story. She walked out of the prison and into the bright, blinding sunlight. The air tasted sweet. A black town car was waiting for her at the curb. Her driver opened the door. Where to, Miss Jenkins? The airport, Reese said, checking her phone. Ecosystem's stock was up 200% this quarter. The world was waiting. I have a keynote speech in Tokyo. They want to know how to build a future that lasts. She got in, and the car pulled away, leaving the gray walls of the prison and Parker Sterling far behind in the dust. The silent wife had spoken, and the whole world had finally listened. And that is the incredible story of how Reese Jenkins turned a divorce settlement into a multi-billion-dollar empire. It's a brutal reminder that silence isn't always weakness sometimes, it's just someone reloading. Parker Sterling learned the hard way that you should never underestimate the person who holds the keys to your success. What do you think? Was Reese's revenge justified, or did she go too far by baiting him into a crime? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of high-stakes corporate revenge, please blast that like button. It really helps the algorithm find more people like you. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a twist. I'll see you in the next video.